For riding home with us, taking this to its fabulous conclusion. I was actually looking for the formal bio of our opening speaker for this last panel. This last panel is really about getting colleges off the campus into communities and civic engagement and helping to drive the broader work of sustainable development, high road metropolitan regions. And there's really no one better in my mind, or there are many, all of them are exceptional practitioners in their own spaces, but someone who actually brings an amazing blend of scholarship, academic orientation, and community practice is our next and opening speaker, this Dr. Brian Murphy. I say, and Brian is someone I met. He's the president of DeAnza Community College, which is an adjacent community college in this area. But I met him part of a group called the Community Learning Partnership, and it's radicals from around the country that has actually been trying to figure out how to take over the world. And the person who's sort of leading that charge is Brian. and he's doing it in a way that is really authentic. You know, people talk about partnerships, public-private community partnerships, and they do it in a way that's to their best interest. You know, what am I going to get out of this, right? And so the partnerships are not real. I'm going to cooperate. You know, I'm going to co-opt. You know, I'm going to engage these folks, but not at an authentic level. Brian is different. He is really about authentic community engagement, and as someone who heads a community college and is actually turning his entire college, as I can see it, I'm not trying to tell anybody on you, but turning his whole community college into an activist college is quite amazing. And we're trying to figure out how to do what he's trying to build on his campus and how to replicate it in community colleges around the United States. And so I'm very pleased to start this conversation with our community partners here, our community college partners here, to see if you have an appetite for this, because it is the essence of our work, is to engage the broadest level of community, not just in education and training, not just in jobs and business development, but community and social change. And so with that, let me introduce Brian to you.
Surely if you actually were building a vanguard organization, you probably wouldn't announce it publicly. It's the first rule of sectarian politics, is to hide, you know, your colleagues. What we're actually doing at Community Learning Partnerships is exploring, as Denise said, the intersection between what community colleges and community-based organizations can do together in the development of leadership within low-income communities, communities of color around the country. So I'm here really on behalf of two networks that are associated and affiliated with the Emerald Cities Collaborative. One is the Community Learning Partnership that Denise just mentioned. The other is a national network and coalition of community colleges called the Democracy Commitment. A little brochure is out there, and you can pick one up on your way out, and our national coordinator is on the stage as one of the panelists, and so you'll hear a little bit more from her about the programmatic elements of what the Democracy Commitment is and what we attempt to do. I wanted just to speak a moment, and I wouldn't call it theoretically as much as thematically, regarding some of the themes that have emerged today and some of the ways in which community colleges might think of themselves in this work that are a little bit outside the ordinary discourse that goes on around community colleges. Today, in thinking about the role of community colleges in preparation for a sustainable urban future and for the community development required for that future, there is a tendency nationally, indeed I would say an inexorable tendency, to speak of community development in almost exclusively economic terms. and to lodge the equity questions and the inequity questions in a largely economic logic. And one could hardly disagree in an economy as fractured and this sort of almost said dissociated as our own, that the question of employment and work and its development is central to the life of our communities. And the role of the community college is particularly in preparing young people from marginalized communities for work is obviously central. I come from a college of some 23,000 students, and we are in the anomalous circumstance of being in probably one of the three wealthiest suburbs in the United States, in Cupertino, about a mile and a half from Apple. And yet 50% of our students are from San Jose. We have 3,600 Mexican-American students who come from the east side of the valley, 2,400 Vietnamese-American students who come from the central city, 1,500 Filipino-American students, 1,300 African-American students, 3,000 Chinese-American students. These are largely working class, immigrant, poor. Only 10% of our students are from Cupertino, the place where we happen to be. So the question for us and for those students, if they are living in what is arguably one of the wealthiest regions, Silicon Valley, they are also living in a region of astonishing inequity and marginalization, in which the opportunities available for entrepreneurial growth, whether it's the green economy, the gray economy, or the old and the new, are really pretty constricted and constrained. It's one thing, and we would obviously agree, to talk about our students in terms of them of their employment futures, and also to talk about them as potential entrepreneurs. We do both. There's not a student at DeAnza who doesn't know that he or she needs good work. They're going to raise a family. They're going to try to live, particularly in an economy as overheated as this one. They know that. They don't need somebody to tell them that. The deeper and more important question that we want to raise, and we've raised it at the college, and I think we're raising it in the 117 campuses across the country that are part of the democracy commitment, is what is our broader responsibility to the opportunities for these same students to become political leaders, to become community leaders, to gain the practical skills with which power can be seized and exercised. One is struck today both by the question of investment, but more importantly by a constant subtext of policy and politics in today's conversation. The question of where and through which mechanisms the green economy emerges, whether it's through state or local mandates, the role of state and local funding, the role of local labor agreements, the role of local community development nonprofit partnerships. All of this has in it either a presumption or the necessity of an analysis of the politics that generates the leadership that makes that happen. Through what electoral processes and what forms of social force do communities have the ability to insist upon project labor agreements or green policies, whether it's retrofit or the growing of new entrepreneurial opportunities? So what has happened not only at our college, but at many other colleges, it's happening right here at Berkeley City College through an institute that they've put together. It's happening at Laney. It's happening at Skyline. It's happening at a lot of colleges around the Bay Area, is persons are saying of ourselves, we have a mission beyond the preparation of our students for work. There was an embarrassing moment I will share with you now that the secretary is gone, regarding one of her colleagues. The Secretary of Education came to my college and gave our graduation speech, and it was a big deal, and students were happy, and you know, there were about 5,000 people there at the graduation, and overwhelmingly, first generation to college, overwhelmingly second language was English. About 85% of our students speak at least 2 languages. And the secretary came and he said that they were, as he looked out on the sea of their faces, he told, excuse the edge in my voice, heartwarming stories of immigrants he knew, and then said that they were part of President Obama's great vision in which they would be the best educated workforce in the world. And you know, there was applause, and I ran into one of our students about 2-3 days later, Mo, was how he was known. Mohammed Shirazi, looks like a linebacker, big man. And I said, so how'd you like the speech, Mo? And he said, it was all right. And I said, what do you mean it's all right? That was the Secretary of Education, you know. And he said, well, you know, I didn't need to hear the stories about immigration. I've done that. And you know, this thing about the best educated workforce, I'm not going to school to beat the Chinese. Now think of the intelligence, the insight, the kind of sophistication that's in that random comment, all right? He's going to school because he wants to build a different world in which his community and the communities of persons not like him can live and work together. That's what he's trying to do. So he asks of his college, don't just prepare me to work in some competitive world in which maybe I win, maybe I lose, because I don't control capital. Prepare me for a world in which I might control that other great element called political power, in which we have some capacity to affect capital. So those are the kinds of questions I think that our students are asking and that I think we best be able to provide some answers to. I did think as well, and it was hard because you didn't want to communicate rudely to persons who are also your allies and other reasons, that the big coup for us was that we had the secretary, the deputy undersecretary of commerce, I believe she was at Stanford that same afternoon. And so the Mercury News said, boy, you know, DeAnza has a coup. We got the secretary. They got the deputy undersecretary. But I thought that the real story was that you know in your hearts that she did not tell the graduates of Stanford University that they were the workforce of the future. She told them they were the leaders of democracy. And so what's happening in the community colleges we work with is we're tired of our people not being told they can be the leaders of this democracy when we are, in fact, the majority, right? So the democracy commitment takes it really seriously that working class people disproportionately don't vote, are disproportionately marginalized from the political, the sources of political power. And if you don't have money, you do have the franchise, but only if you exercise it. So the question for us has been for our students in literally more than 100 community colleges enrolling more than 2 million students. How can we prepare our students for exercising their real lives as union members, as community members, as voters, as leaders, as persons who will be asked to take responsibility for the public world in addition to their private lives as consumers or workers. That's really the message. And so our partnership with Emerald Cities is rooted in the notion that we're partners in the greening of the economies and the cities we love and care for. But we're not going to be sustained partners as community colleges unless we are both modeling the practice, sustainable management and energy management and the courses and the programs and environmental studies and the curriculum, and at the same time preparing students to assume their rightful place in the structure of power within which these public institutions live or die. So that's what we're about. And for us, community development in the broadest sense is the development of entirely new models of what a sustainable living community might look like. The final thing I'll say, just to increase the stakes even higher, is that we sometimes use the phrase, what does it mean to speak about civic engagement in the twilight of the empire? Is that, I'm sorry that Angela's not here now, but I was thinking as she was speaking, and I'm saying this without pride particularly, that all of us who grew up in the generation of the civil rights movement and the anti-war movement, despite our critiques of imperialism, there was a way in which we really believed that the abundance was forever. Without taking assumption, not thinking self-critically about what it meant, therefore, to be dependent upon an imperial hegemony that would last forever, and it's no longer lasting forever, in which the rise of China and Russia and Brazil and a united Europe and hopefully united Africa means the whole world's going to be different. And so if our view for our young people is that the social image of success is a 2,700 square foot house in Cupertino, it's game over. Can't happen. And so they have a big responsibility. And that is to think not only of what role they play in the economy as it now is, but what's the kind of economy they would want to be in, and the kind of community they would want to live in that's truly sustainable. So, you know, when you're talking to kids who are coming from immigrant, working class, stressed communities, you need not be shy in raising those questions for them. They will embrace those questions because in the back of their minds, they are their questions. They don't want to buy the hype. They want to learn how they can build a different kind of world. Thank you.
Buenas tardes. I'm glad, my name is Antonio Diaz, and I'm with Poder, people organizing demand environmental and economic rights, which is why we say Poder. Can you hear me? Yes. So I'm glad we're going to have a conversation about hegemonic strategies and liberation for communities. It's a great way to get started. I want you to bear with me for a moment. I know it's a long day. Some of us have been here since 8:30 in the morning. So if everyone can stand up for a quick second. Yeah, do a quick stretch. And if you could look around and look for someone that you haven't met yet or introduce yourself to. All right. And so introduce yourselves to a new person. Introducing yourself to someone you haven't met yet. So, and the last thing.
By the way, and you work with?
I'm a national coordinator.
Yeah, and you know, I worked with Sid and a couple other people, and was at LA
So,
planning. So I'm helping with the Oakland.
I'm glad we're making new friends. The last thing, if I could get your attention. Hello? Hello? So the last thing is if you can, with your new friend, come down and sit towards the front, please. So bring your new friend further up to the front. We want to have a more intimate conversation here. So if you can please bring...
So I sat in on a lot of work I put in. So very
organizer.
familiar with it.
So come on up. Come on down, that's right. Don't be shy.
Yeah.
Folks ready? Come on down. You're the next Emerald City's contestant, yes. Okay. So, yeah, now we need to get started, folks. We want to finish on time. I know you all do as well. Yeah, well, it'd be good to get energized in the final stretch of our session here. Like I said, Al, we're starting. Like I said, I'm Antonio Diaz. I'm with Poder. Poder is a community-based environmental justice organization working with Latino immigrant families in San Francisco, work on environmental economic justice issues. I'm really proud to be here with all of you. You know, Poder was one of the founding members of Emerald City, San Francisco, now Emerald City's Bay Area. And it's great also to be here at Berkeley Community College and be part of this initiative. You know, community colleges obviously play a fundamental role in our communities, in immigrant communities, communities of color, as anchor institutions, you know, organizations that not only, you know, educate our folks, you know, prepare folks for job, but fundamentally also help foster leadership. I'm happy to say actually that one of the Poder founders got her start in her career path through San Francisco, City College San Francisco, and her vision and commitment to social justice, as she has talked about, you know, to our young folks that we work with, was cultivated through her education at CCSF. Part of what we want to do today is to talk about what's happening right now in terms of community colleges and other institutions of higher learning on efforts related to energy efficiency and sustainable communities. We want to talk about the region's, the Bay Area region's political environment, the challenges and opportunities, and also talk about what kind of partnerships can be advanced with community colleges and different partners to really build a stronger regional economy. The format for this, I think we're going to be doing it a little bit differently. I'll be introducing our speakers. And in some of the other sessions, we've introduced speakers, said a few words, had some questions directed at the speakers, and then we opened it up. But I think what I want to do now, once again, it's a smaller, more intimate group, is just have a broader conversation. After the speakers talk about their organizations and the work that they're doing, in terms of the questions that we have, I want to open those up to all of us. So folks on the panel and all of you, so we can engage in this conversation. So let's get started. So I'll introduce all our speakers, and then I'll call on each one of them to say a few words. So our first speaker is going to be Amy Bjorn, I'm sorry, who's the National Coordinator of the Democracy Commitment, and she works with the American Association of State Colleges and Universities. After Amy, Lynn Galal with Green Communities Program at Pacific Gas and Electric, PG&E. After Lynn, we're going to have Brian, who's the legal counsel at the Green Lining Institute. And then closing us off is going to be Ruben Lizardo, who's an associate director at Policy Link. And as I mentioned, they'll mention a bit more about their organizations in a few minutes. And after that, we'll have our broader dialogue. So to get us started, Amy?
All right, thank you. It's a daunting task to follow up Brian Murphy first of all, as a speaker and then as a boss. You can only imagine what our conference calls every week are like. So first, I wanted to start off with a quote that I find really compelling to the work that we do. It's from Ira Harkavy. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Ira. He's a very quirky individual, professor at Penn, and very, very powerful and engaging in this work. And he said, I strongly agree with the Chilean sociologist Eugenio Treni, and I don't know if I say that right, that the answer to the question, what kind of education do we need, is to be found in the answer to the question, what kind of society do we want? If human beings hope to maintain and develop a particular type of society, they must develop and maintain the particular type of educational system conducive to it. So the democracy commitment was born out of a blatant recognition that our democracy is in crisis. It's actually it's illustrated very well by voter turnout. In 2007, out of the 172 democracies or countries that have some semblance of democratic system, we were ranked 134 in voter turnout. 134 out of 172. There are only 193 countries in the entire world. We, up until this last year, had some of the best access to voting possible until some of these laws have gone through. And we cannot get anything close to 50% turnout. So there's that. I really liked what Ms. Belfry said in the last panel when she talked about the idea of being part of the conversation in the collaborative effort because she had a vested interest in it. Because she had a vested interest in it, she deserved to be at the table of collaboration. And it's our work to make sure that everyone knows, especially students, that they all have vested interest in everything. And the sad part is that they're unaware of that. And it's demonstrated pretty well with a survey done of 18 to 24-year-olds, where 60% of them could not find Iraq on a map. 88 couldn't find Afghanistan, 70% couldn't find North Korea, and 33% couldn't find Louisiana. Now, this wasn't done in 1997. This wasn't done in 1984. This was done in 2006. The war in Afghanistan and Iraq had already been going on for 5 years. Katrina, did you say 3 or 4? I'm sorry, I thought you were giving me a different number. Giving you inaccurate, different fact checkers.
I'm one of those. Not this time.
My husband's a journalist and he's watching right now, so I'm a little scared. But basically, the idea is that we are concerned about our students who are now complacent. They're apathetic to our systems, they're disenchanted, they're disillusioned by our policies and our politics. They do not believe that they can make a difference, that they have the capacity or the voice in our public sphere. So we are really, what we really wanted to do with community colleges is work with them because they are the perfect place, because they are just that. They are community colleges. The students that go there are from the communities. They've grown up there. They will go back into the communities when they've finished. They aren't transplant students. They didn't travel hundreds and thousands of miles away to be able to go to this college. They wanted to be educated and they wanted to give back. They wanted to feel like they could contribute. The median age of community college students is generally between the age of 27 and 29. So these are not young people. These are people who have jobs, they have families, they're cognizant of the issues going on in their communities. And they want to have access to education so that they can address them. And that is another reason why the Democracy Commitment is so excited about working with community colleges, because the inherent purpose of community colleges is to be accessible, to create accessible education for everyone, which does address inequities in our society. Something I've heard a lot today, I don't know if anyone else noticed this, I think one other person said, oh, I did realize this. The word collaboration and partnership has been said more times than any other words. And so I just wanted to bring that up as something that is really interesting to me. Is out of the 193 countries in this world, they have at least 50% of populations moving to urban areas. In the United States in 2010, it was recorded that 82% of our population lives in urban areas. 82%. And in urban areas are the richest areas for diversity of all kinds. So of religion, culture, language, sexual orientation, ethnicity, race, socioeconomic status, all of that. We have such a responsibility to be tolerant, to recognize our differences, and to practice democratic behavior. And so this is what is really important to me, is that to recognize the Democracy Commitment is not just policy issues, it's not just knowing about all of the legislation that's going through. That's incredibly important and it has to be known. But it's twofold. It's also democratic behavior that we must practice every day. And democratic behavior is collaboration. It's the things that we're talking about all the time, especially in this room. And collaboration, along with a lot of, I'm going to read you actually a list of these things that come from collaboration. Collaboration is one of the skills of democratic participation and democratic behavior. Another is that you gain from practicing democracy is critical thinking and analytic reasoning, applied knowledge in real-world settings, ethical decision-making, complex problem-solving, intercultural competence, recognizing the role of the U.S. in the world, acknowledging cultural diversity in the U.S. and abroad, and then civic knowledge, participation, and engagement. Now that was not written, and I didn't read that out of the Manual for Missionaries for Democracy. That was actually data done in 2010, where a research institute actually went out and asked employers, what would you like to see be an emphasized outcome in colleges across the nation? These are outcomes that employers want in the people that are interviewing for their jobs. They want critical thinking and analytic skills, and these are things that come out of practicing democracy. So what we do is harness that. We encourage it. We call to action all across the nation at community colleges. Right now we're working on an issue called Engage the Election 2012. And basically it was a call to action to have students register to vote, to go and vote, to be informed about the issues, to be informed about who they should be voting for president and all of the legislation that's going through. And it's been a really amazing opportunity as well as a lot of other things. So I'm realizing that I'm talking far too much, so I'm gonna stop and we can continue on from there.
Great.
But yeah.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. So I'm here from PG&E, and hopefully I'll give you an example of some collaboration, partnership, real-world application of applied knowledge by students in a sustainable field of energy efficiency. So I work in the energy efficiency department at PG&E, and particularly in the local government and community partnership program. And for years, for several years, we have been working with local governments as partners to deliver to them energy efficiency retrofits to their municipal facilities, and also to work with our local partners to deliver energy efficiency services to their very small businesses in their community. They're hard to reach businesses, and in some cases to their hard to reach residential customers. 2.5 years ago, we added another service to our programs for local governments that my team was responsible for developing and implementing, and I'm really proud of this particular program. And it's really to help local governments who have very limited budgets and limited staff, help them complete their greenhouse gas inventories and climate action plans for their municipal facilities and for their entire community that they're responsible for. These are things that need to be done in order to really figure out how to have a sustainable community as far as energy consumption is concerned. But these are things that many of our local governments just cannot afford to do, either with funding or with staffing right now. So one of our local partners is the Association of Monterey Bay Area Governments, and Elizabeth Russell there used a beautiful model using student interns that we stole with her blessing, and we repeated it all over Northern California. And in the last 2.5 years, we've completed more than 130 greenhouse gas inventories for local governments using student interns. And the way this model works, it's a beautiful model, and I thank Elizabeth for this all the time, but the way it works is that we at PG&E work with our partners like the Sierra Business Council, who is working in 14 rural Sierra counties. We work with the Great Valley Center, working with rural counties in the San Joaquin Valley. We work here in the Bay Area with the Association of Bay Area Governments, Monterey Bay Area, and other partners. And we provide them with funding and support, and in return what they do is they work in their communities to identify cities and counties that would like this assistance. And once they've done that, then they recruit students from their local community colleges or colleges as interns, and we're able to pay a stipend to those students. And then we also work very closely with ICLEI, Local Governments for Sustainability. They're a strong partner of ours in what we're doing with climate planning. And this model is beautiful because our ICLEI colleagues, who actually have written the protocols for the greenhouse gas inventories, teach these students how to do an inventory over a semester. So they'll have a class, they'll teach the students the first chunk of this complex process. The students will work at it for a few weeks with some support from ICLEI, some support from our local government partners. We provide data to the students for energy, and then there's another class. So this continues, several lessons over a 6, 7, 8 week period. And as we go through this, the students are producing an inventory for cities and counties to use. And at the conclusion, the students are actually invited to go to a city council meeting or a county supervisor meeting, depending on whether it's a county inventory or a city inventory. And they're invited to either present the results of their inventory to the city council, or a city staffer will present it, and the student will be there to answer questions, and the student can observe the process, which is lovely. And a couple of our students have actually even received full-time job offers as a result of this training. So this is one example of how we've been able to capitalize on the talent pool in our local colleges to help cities and counties who right now are understaffed. And one other example, which I think is interesting because it's local, is another project we're working on with the Alameda County Office of Education. And it's a pilot program there, and the pilot program basically is trying to figure out how the Office of Education can support all of the school districts that they support, and how they can support them in digging much deeper into energy efficiency to reduce the bills that these schools have to pay to reduce the energy consumption and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And one component of this pilot program is, again, using community college students. 7 were hired from Laney and Ohlone colleges. And these 7 students have been trained on how to use an industry standard software tool that allows them to benchmark the energy use in K through 12 schools in Alameda County. And then the Alameda County Office of Education can then look at these scores and determine which of these schools is really ripe for energy efficiency retrofits. And so it helps them prioritize where they really want to focus their efforts and their money. So those are just 2 examples of, I think, a wonderful win-win partnership between PG&E, students, and local governments.
Next is Ryan.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So for those that aren't familiar with Greenlighting's work, we're a multi-ethnic, multi-issue organization whose mission is to create and sustain wealth in low-income and communities of color. Now, our Green Assets team is our environmental program where we try to create economic opportunities and reduce pollution in these communities at the same time, essentially put the green in Greenlighting. Now, we work mostly at the state level through legislation and regulatory intervention at the California Public Utilities Commission, the Air Resources Board, and similar agencies to ensure that the vast amount of money that our state is investing in emerging technologies like renewable energy and energy efficiency actually result in tangible benefits in these communities. So this is both as a consumer, as a business owner, as workers, and importantly as voters, as was mentioned a little bit ago. Now, I'm going to give you a few examples of the work I do and how it relates to what can be done to form partnerships with community colleges. In the energy efficiency space, I regularly intervene in proceedings before the CPUC that provide guidance and approve budgets on the massive energy efficiency portfolios that the large utilities undertake each year. These budgets are upwards of $1.5 million per year, and that's to say nothing of the low-income programs, which are also substantial. This advocacy generally takes a 2-pronged approach. First, we ensure that the workforce education and training programs are robust and include industry partnerships with these institutions that normally reach out to and serve disadvantaged communities like community colleges. So that's on the supply side of the equation. Second, we ensure there's adequate opportunities for job placement and progressively higher road work upon completion of training, and that they are actually good jobs. And the second part is actually really important because the ERA stimulus was really good at training folks and helping localities build the infrastructure for training. But we all know that more needs to be done when it comes to actual job placement. Now, as an example, Pacific Gas and Electric's Power Pathways program is often held up as a model for these kind of partnerships. And this is really, really important in California right now as a best practice because upwards of 50% of their utility workforce is going to be retiring in the next few years. They're already retirement eligible, and it's been delayed because of the recession. And you put that in the backdrop of us being, a minority-majority state and going to be a supermajority state very soon, and the massive amounts of infrastructure projects that need to be completed, there's an opportunity there. Now, what the problem is that they subcontract out a great deal of their energy efficiency services, and their contractors don't always share these practices. And so, that's why we're working with Carol Zabin, who you heard from earlier today, to ensure that both the CPUC and the utilities are sending the appropriate market signal to their subcontractors that diversity and inclusion is something they value. And I think, as Stephen DeBerry mentioned this morning, it's the will that's needed, it's leadership that's needed, and I really couldn't agree more. Now, a related topic that we're pretty excited to report on is the recent signing of AB 1532 and SB 535, which was sponsored by Greenlining as well as a diverse alliance of partner organizations. 535 will ensure that upwards of 25% of the cap and trade revenues, which we expect to be up to $250 million in the first year, will be invested in the most economically disadvantaged communities in the state, who also already bear a high pollution burden. No less than 10% of these investments must be in projects directly located in these communities, and this is impactful for community colleges in a couple of ways. First, we know that there's tremendous untapped energy savings potential in the educational sector, which is critical at this time where there's diminished resources and constrained funds to these institutions. Second, we need a well-trained workforce to fill these jobs and reach our long-term energy goals. And related as another item I'd like to touch on, the last, is a high-profile settlement between the CPUC and NRG. Now, some of you might know that the NRG company is the successor to DeAnza, which was one of the bad actors during the 2000 and 2001 energy crisis. Now, the settlement is not only noteworthy because of the $300 million that are going to be returned directly to ratepayers as compensation, but because $100 million of that dollars will be returned in the form of on-the-ground infrastructure investments to electrify our transportation system. Much of this money, a significant chunk, is going to be in disadvantaged communities, low-income communities, and sometimes in the form of car-sharing programs at low or no cost. This is something that Greenlining insisted on, and we were part of this process. And this company has also enthusiastically agreed to a couple other things. They've agreed to invest a significant portion, as I mentioned, in these communities, to adhere to high road contracting practices as it constructs these facilities, and to adhere to best practices in supplier diversity so that minority, women, disabled, veteran-owned businesses will have access to the contracting opportunities that arise. Now, it's also worth mentioning that with the help of Greenlining and the leadership of the Commission, we've gone from roughly $1 billion annually in diverse spend to, that was 10 years ago. Today, we're spending upwards of $7 billion a year investing back into the communities. That's a big deal. And now jurisdictions across the country are now coming to us for advice on how they can start their own programs. And that's at the federal level, the state level, and the local level. Just the other day, the state of Illinois wanted to find out more about what we do. Again, these impact community colleges and that well-trained workers are going to be needed to fill these jobs, and because of the economic multiplier effects that can happen in these communities, especially if these projects occur on or near these campuses. Now, a common theme that we hear in all this work that robust partnership between education and industry are critical to realizing these benefits. Another theme has been collaboration. A lot of these partners bring different perspectives and unique attributes and approaches to this problem that we're all trying to work on together. And each of these approaches are absolutely critical to getting the job done. We've been doing the work at the CPUC for decades now, and for a long time, we're really the only ones. But I'm really excited now because I'm starting to see environmental justice groups, workforce groups. I'm starting to see ethnic chambers of commerce participate in these proceedings, and that's really exciting because greenlining is the antidote to redlining. And so for us, it's really exciting to be able to lift up these voices and include them in the conversation on the statewide policy level so we can begin to direct these resources to local institutions that serve our communities, like community colleges. So that was a ton of information. I'll stop there.
Great. Thank you, Ryan. And finally, I'll turn it to Ruben.
And I'm going to do my best to not repeat what folks are saying, but I just will underscore. I think you already heard from Angela maybe at lunchtime or something, and I'm hoping that she laid out the central argument to our social justice advocacy, which is that equity is peer growth model, that because of demographic change, we actually cannot achieve the things that we used to be able to achieve, even though there was strong racial discrimination as a nation. when African Americans or Latinos were minorities, the fact that there was racial discrimination in education wasn't as harmful to the economy as it is now, or even to the democracy, the great beautiful words of Chancellor Murphy put on the table. So as we have made this transition, really I guess I would just underscore that that mission that was so beautifully laid out is really the mission that we all need to be on. But my central message, and PolicyLink has been in this realm for a bit now, and this program, Power Pathway, that was described, is actually highlighted in a policy and advocacy document that we created looking at infrastructure jobs in California. And our research found that there were about 700,000 middle skill jobs such as these that we're talking about, not just in energy building retrofits, but in utilities and all these other infrastructure investments that we as a state provide. And it's either the ratepayers or the taxpayers, and it's all the same people. So when we think about the demographic change, we need to think about communities of color, not just in the way that they've been described in the national campaign recently, but literally as the ratepayers, literally as the economic engine that's making this country better, because the burden of support is shifting from what used to be a majority white population to a majority of color population. So we're not takers as much as we are sustainers of the great economy and the democracy. I think African Americans have always been the leaders on making this country a more democratic, more egalitarian place, and Native Americans and others, before them. But anyway, all this to say that PolicyLink is totally down with the linear mission of Emerald Cities. Let's use the energy building retrofit sector to prove that capitalism can actually be more egalitarian. They could create opportunity and democracy, and it can bring down the greenhouse gases. It can make us more sustainable. But at the same time, I guess I'm with Brian, that I think the goal is to the big mission, who we are. And the last two things I really want to say is, and just two words, si se puede. It is possible, and the reason I say that is not because I'm a dreamer, because it is actually happening. I've had the privilege and honor of working with young people in South Central or East LA or here in the East Bay that are doing everything, all the beautiful words that came out of Brian's mouth are actually happening now. One of the problems that we need to all confront as we think about community colleges as catalysts for change, at least in California, is that literally that mission that was so beautifully described is under attack in this state. That the people who set policy actually are going away from the mission of community colleges being open access and thinking only of community colleges in utilitarian ways, only in terms of the part that Brian talked about, the economy. And so if we're going to ask community colleges to do what they can do and are doing, we also have to be ready to defend them. And so I actually agree. I guess I'm repeating Brian's position, but I want to say it a little bit different. It should be about democracy and how, it's about literacy, because I'll be honest with you, black and brown kids need to learn how to read and write. And they need to know how to do all the technology that's going to make them competitive. And so they may have low literacy levels, but there are other people out in the world who can read, but don't read the world, which is why there's so many undecided voters in the election, that it's really a problem of reading the world that we find ourselves in. So that when we do this democracy stuff, I encourage you, yes, it's for people of color, but let's bring white folks into this learning, because in some ways, and I taught in community colleges, in some ways, they were the ones that had the most ground to gain because they weren't sharing the experience. The kids of color, inequality, they got that. It was the other people who were privileged that were having trouble coming aboard. They were the slow learners. So with equity, it has to be for everybody. For democracy, for accountability, it has to be for everybody. And I think that's the beauty of community colleges. It is for everybody. And so the last thing I say about Si Se Puede is that, in fact, it is possible. So the part about the literacy and the democracy and the organizing, teaching organizing, that's what I did when I worked for Denise at LA Trade Tech. But if we're going to see this economy grow that we envision, that is so beautiful, that Jerry and Denise and Avni and Tara are selling, or that greenlining is pushing, I think also we need to just be very practical. We make the road by walking. So the community colleges are in fact economic engines. They're hiring people. They're making business decisions. So if we want this egalitarian world, economic world, then it's really about backing the presidents to get their board of trustees to make some business decisions that match the world that we want. So I'll say that it's not really that complicated. There are a bunch of things that we can do, and we talked about them with Emerald Cities, and I say that we actually can have the world we want. But it really means talking really in big, inspiring ways, but also all the very practical things that we do. And I'll just end it with this. I think we got Peralta down, right? They signed the MOU. They're all over this thing, right? We got San Francisco City College, and I assume that Brian wouldn't be talking so big if he ain't delivering DeAnza, right? So you're delivering DeAnza on this promise, right? The Emerald City's promise? Done. So now what we're saying, what we need, our goal is to get the other 90 community colleges in California that haven't made that commitment. So that's what I'm saying is, let's talk big, but let's get practical too, and know that we can do it and organize ourselves. I think the students are key, but so are the faculty, so are the presidents, so are the business partners of the community colleges. And I think we can have the world we want. It's in front of us, we just need to take it.
Thank you, Ruben. Very exciting, inspiring words from our panelists that really speak about the Emerald City's mission of greening our cities, building our communities, and strengthening our democracy by concrete examples and having that vision and ganas to bring about social justice and social change. Actually, before I guess start with some questions that we can all engage in. Actually, I do want to give folks, if they have questions for the panelists based on what they said. If you have any questions for any of our panelists, we'll take those, and then we'll engage in a broader dialogue. Any questions for our panelists? Clarifications? Yes.
I just had a point of clarification. The two pieces of state legislature that you're referencing, AB and SB, can you give me those numbers again, please? Thank you.
There was AB 1532 and SB 535. Sure, yes. AB 1532 basically describes how the money will flow, and 535 describes where the money will go. So the process is in 1532, and which communities are prioritized you can find in 535.
What's over here?
Well, my name is Cleveland Smith. I'm English faculty here at Berkeley City College, and I was really excited about the title of this. The second part of it was engaging faculty, staff, and students in civic life and projects. And I guess part of the question that I have, like, what are some of those models that are out there where we are doing that work, and trying to center the conversation around that work rather than the policies, the institutions, and how they are kind of like trying to place them over the people and have the people work within that particular frame, and how we can get the faculty and students and staff at the colleges to shape these institutions that we're trying to place over top of them.
Okay.
I could speak to that a little bit. Something that we've actually just done in collaboration with the Association of American Colleges and Universities is we received an NEH grant, a National Endowment for the Humanities grant, and we chose 10 community colleges across the nation. And over the next 3 years, they will use a lot of civic engagement pedagogies and best practices to actually embed those into curriculum and courses. It's to create learning communities. One school is doing an alternative spring break where they actually can go and learn about immigration issues in Texas. Another one is Kapulani in Hawaii, so they talk about storytelling and heritage issues, and how the youth of Hawaii are really losing their own identity with their heritage. So there's these community colleges across the nation that are actually doing this work for the humanities, so specifically to English professor. But we also have a faculty in Michigan at Henry Ford Community College. I just went to this student convention, and they had 500 students from all over Michigan. They came up and went through the convention process. They did a caucus, they did debates, they did voting, and students actually were able to sit down and talk with their congresspeople, with their representatives, with council members, and talk to them about issues that they found really important. So healthcare, green sustainability, gay marriage was one of them. So all these issues that are real issues, and they said, this is something that's really important to us, and we want to see it change. And those were political science teachers. Georgia Perimeter, up until they had some issues of late, they had this amazing sustainability program where it was actually multidisciplinary, and it's something that I would actually really love to duplicate on many campuses across the nation, because sustainability is inherently democratic and it is inherently multidisciplinary. You have to know a lot of things to be able to affect change on multiple levels in the community. And what they did was they actually would work on a lake. And so they'd have chemistry students go in and take samples, and then they would have public relations students start marketing the work that they're doing. They'd have political science students go and do town hall and town halls, so they could actually talk to the community about what's going wrong in the lake, things like that. So all of these different multidisciplinary areas where they collaborated together and actually tried to fix things in their communities. And so I found it incredibly inspiring, and that's something that I hope to help students, along with the help of Emerald Cities. Denise is kind of on board with the idea at the very beginning, to do that same exact thing across the nation, but with a kind of a city planning lens, so we can work on transportation and things and all sorts of areas.
A couple examples closer to home, though, and I'm surprised she didn't bring this up, but it is true that it's happening, is that the same project that Brian and a colleague here are working on are trying to grow out a community planning and economic development degree program at Laney College that will be shared in the Peralta system, and it's growing. It's building off one of the organizing priorities, which is already in play with a certificate program that College of the Alamedas has on violence prevention, teaching young people how to be organizers to get at the root causes of violence in their neighborhoods. And it ties back to all of this. And in that, you know, we need to say, that's the other point I would say with community colleges, the idea of silo busting needs to happen right in the curriculum, so that in this, whatever it is, sustainability curriculum needs to have the values and ethics in it. And I'll just throw out another program that you ought to look at that's not in the sustainability area, but it's in the health one. City College San Francisco has probably the premier community health worker program in the nation, and they intentionally embed the values of democracy, egalitarianism, all of that into their work. And so that's the one thing I would say. Let's not build out the sustainability workforce training path without embedding the values of democracy in it.
Anyone else on the panel from the audience want to
I have a question. Could I ask a quick question?
Yeah, of course.
I have a question of Lynn with PG&E. I wanted to just clarify if the two programs you described, was that Power Pathway? And also related to that is that PG&E is I think heavily unionized, and using your union workforce to tie back to community college and pre-apprenticeship training programs is a huge opportunity, and I think Power Pathway really got to that. Is that an ongoing commitment from PG&E, and can we build on that with Emerald Cities?
So thank you for the question. Yes, what I described was not Power Pathway. What I described is one of our energy efficiency programs that is distinct completely from Power Pathway. Power Pathway is in a different part of the company. Power Pathway is a program PG&E initiated several years ago when we foresaw that many of our employees would be retiring. And we were trying to figure out, okay, how do we build a workforce, a highly qualified workforce that can take these people's places over time, not just at PG&E, but in the energy industry. And the Power Pathway program, and some of you may know it better than I do, but the Power Pathway program essentially is a collaboration between PG&E, community colleges, colleges in Northern California to do to work together, it varies depending on which one of the colleges we're partnering with, but to mutually develop curriculum for courses that will enable students to enter into the energy field, to figure out how to deliver those courses. Will they be delivered at the school or at one of PG&E's educational facilities or somewhere else? The curricula are focused, the curriculum was originally focused on skilled labor. So folks coming out of the Power Pathway program would have a leg up in becoming eligible to participate in our programs to become linemen and other skilled labor. It has since expanded to include energy efficiency, engineering, renewables, other areas, and it's also expanded to include military veterans. So that is a completely different, distinct program than what I described. What I described was a, sorry, another question you had was, does PG&E have an ongoing commitment to this? And as far as I'm aware, yes, we do. And our workforce, as Ryan mentioned, will be retiring, and these folks are folks who are following behind them who are already employed by PG&E will leave spaces for entry-level positions, and Power Pathway will continue to give us highly qualified entry-level employees.
I guess I would just follow up briefly to, I guess, give you hope or a challenge to require these same practices of your contractors in the energy efficiency space, because that's where a lot of this investment needs to happen, and we'd like to see that across the board.
And the answer is that IBEW works with that effort. But I raised it for this reason. One of the things that communities of color, and we're actually supporters of Power Pathway, have raised is then the requirements that often go with training and also being hired. And the idea that if you were formerly incarcerated, you formerly got in trouble with the law, that you wouldn't be eligible either to do the training or to actually work in certain parts of the utility industry. It's not just PG&E, I'm talking about the whole industry. And so that is an issue, but when we brought that up, here's the interesting thing was, the union itself said, we're concerned about it because many of their members, I think it's a good third almost of anybody in California that has had some kind of record. And so that's an issue that we're gonna continue to have to wrestle with if we're gonna make these programs accessible to everybody, is what happens when you pay your debt to society. How do you get to be in an opportunity to stop being actually a burden on society? Instead of getting early retirement at age 25, then we just pay for you to live and be housed and all this stuff. How do we get those folks back in our workforce?
I
think,
again, just to follow up quickly, this is an issue that we're keeping a very close eye on.
So another program I think you might want to look at is the Developing Energy Efficiency Professionals program that is currently being developed with the State Chancellor's Office in collaboration with a utility, investor-owned utility company. And the purpose of that was to get away from the Power Pathway program, which was seen to be self-serving because it spoke to the industry that was leaving the workforce. So essentially the purpose of the Developing Energy DEEP program is to take students and create a peer-to-peer model. So the students have a 4-staged program they go through. Stage 1 involves them going through what's called a student sustainability primer, where they look at holistically at the idea of sustainability, right? So they go through food, transportation, water, climate change, the urban environment. The second stage of it involves them writing narratives. So they're beginning to take a narrative of themselves about sustainability. They produce newsletters for campuses. So what they're required to do after stage 1 is to write essays, making them critical thinkers, right? They're writing 1,500-word essays with 5 resources. They draw on that for content of the newspaper. The third stage involves them actually taking on hands-on projects on campuses so that they can now take what they've learned about sustainability and see it in practice in the built environment and the spaces in between the built environment. The fourth stage, this is a 2-year program, and it's paid internships, $10 an hour for 10 hours a week for 2 years. The fourth stage is a collaboration with USGBC, which requires the students to go through the Lead Green Associate training and actually get that credential to be able to put that on their resume. So now what we're creating are holistic individual students who are capable of questioning the food they're putting into their bodies. They're capable of questioning the systems that are in place that limits their choices. That's the power of the DEEP program.
Eddie, did you have your hand up? Eddie, and then Al, back here.
Hi, Eddie On with Brightline Defense Project. One of the themes that had been mentioned earlier that I've been noticing throughout the day is the theme of local hire, actually, which is connecting low-income communities to jobs, specifically in the energy efficiency sector. I'm wondering, I know Mr. Young, for instance, has engaged extensively in working on increasing diversity in the workforce by arguing potentially for targeted hiring practices. I'm wondering, as well as Mr. Young's thoughts, what the other panelists think of this as a model to connect people to employment.
We're all for it, and the only thing I would suggest is that community colleges actually start being players on the PLA side of it. If community colleges are going to do the projects, you should have some requirement that some of your graduates be included in that if they fit the disadvantaged quality, whatever they're called, characteristics, because the hit against education and training that the other side uses is training to nowhere. So I think that local targeted hiring and having these mandates and working with the unions is a fine thing, and I think community colleges should use it to their advantage too, especially when they're already committed to equality.
So others want to comment on that, or anyone else? If not, okay.
I wanted to make an observation, which I hope will lead to a little discussion, picking up on some of the things that Brian said. And I would like to pose that there's a very basic connection between sort of nuts and bolts energy efficiency work in changing the political culture. One of the foundations of our current political culture is fear. People across the board are afraid that they don't have enough. You can fill in what enough blank. One of the things they're afraid of is that we don't have enough energy, which is absurd. I mean, we use an enormous percentage of the world's total energy. We're in a situation, when you think about it, step back, and I don't mean anything derogatory by this, but we have energy efficiency programs to cut down energy waste in low-income houses. We've got to be the only society in the world where even the poorest people in the society are wasting energy. Not but I mean, think about it. I mean, the enormous surplus of energy that we have, and yet people are worried about, and one of the things that is the fear of this. And if we can, and I think by getting to young people who haven't bought into the whole, they haven't bought into the notion that it's their right to be able to drive an SUV that gets 12 miles a gallon and pay $2 a gallon for gas. They don't think that's a God-given right yet. If you can get to them and, and just say, look, we don't need all this stuff. It's not that we don't have enough. It's not that there's, not enough to go around. There's too much. And by changing that, we lower our dependence, we lower the level of fear, we lower our dependence upon the people who are trying to create this atmosphere of fear in this notion that we're somehow, as somebody said earlier, we need austerity. We don't need austerity. We're swimming in resources. We just need to realize that and use them better.
I think I would agree with most of what you said, except for perhaps the initial framing. And that's, I don't think low-income communities waste energy. I think that they're forced to live in inefficient housing stock. And that being said, even care participants, for the most part, with few exceptions, rarely get out of tiers 1 and 2. So, I mean, I agree with most of what you said, but I really don't think that low-income people are generally wasteful.
I didn't mean that they were wasteful. I meant that, if you look at low-income communities in other places, they don't have lights, they don't have electricity, they don't have heat. We're in a situation where we're for a lot of reasons, poor house, whatever else, but you're blowing energy through these houses that is wasted. It's not serving any useful purpose.
Al?
So I was still hung up on the question that was raised by the brother here. I'm sorry. That works here about the question of engagement in the communities and the roles of the community colleges with respect to the communities in that forum. You know, you wouldn't know it to watch the TV and stuff like that, but there's a very active and vibrant activist community that's struggling everywhere on all kinds of issues, you know, whether it be hydrofracking or energy use, or, I mean, for example, Local Clean Energy Alliance, which I'm a coordinator of, is one of 50 organizations in the Oakland Climate Action Coalition, and these are people that are operating on the level of transportation needs of people in the community, on the level of housing needs on the people in the community, questions of gentrification for transit-oriented development stuff, questions of energy. I mean, if you go there, that is a whole community college of individuals and activists that know more about what's going on, you know, in our society than, you know, many of the people who probably even teach at community colleges. So, I mean, I think the question, I mean, one of the questions that I thought was being addressed there is to try to say, how do we get the community colleges in this quest to enrich democracy and to broaden participation of working class students and whatnot to really be tied in to this whole activism that's going on as a way of seeing the community as basically a schoolhouse of democracy in terms of that level of activism. And I was wondering if people had some thoughts about those closer ties and relationships.
So I see that Denise wants to respond to that, and if there's others on the panel or on.
Yeah.
So in fact, thank you for the questions, because it's really the question that we're asking of our community college partners about how to do this with some examples and some resources to help to go there. And let me just say this, one of the things that Ruben and I have been part of over 15 years of working at the community college level doing just this, getting communities, students from our communities first into the classroom and then back into the community to learn experientially. And I think all of pedagogy in our space is going into experiential learning. And that's where our young people thrive. You know, they don't thrive at a desk with pencil and paper. They thrive by hands-on doing and experiencing. And the community is such a laboratory, an opportunity for learning everything. And I think Amy talked about it. They learn economics, they learn politics, they learn, you know, reading, writing, and arithmetic, because they're putting press releases together, and, you know, they're organizing, they're learning all of that. So all that's to say is that is, you know, Emerald City's third leg is strengthening our democracy and civic engagement. And so what we would like to do in partnership with community colleges is to bring both the democracy commitment. We have several partnerships that will help fuel the richness that's there that we want to help mine. The democracy commitment is one. I would like to make certain that all of our community colleges sign up to the democracy commitment. I mean, if you do nothing else, I think Ruben says, let's walk the walk, talk to, you know, you don't have to do anything else. Just sign up to say, I get it. The civic engagement is important. We're going to engage our students in the larger work of what is this world, what the heck is this world going to be, and then become a part of 100 community college affiliation of folks who are thinking about this and pushing education to another space. So that's just one level. The other is the community learning partnership, which we talked about, which is an organization working with community college to develop curricula that is actually training people to be organizers, change agents, and doing it experientially. You can actually go to the Community Learning Partnership website, and there is a beginning. We'll have a resource materials there, curriculum established, videos, how-tos on getting, you know, students into the community, and what is the pedagogy of that? How do you journal? How do you evaluate, and so forth? So what I'll end on saying is that I would hope that this convening is just the beginning of the conversation about how to build a pretty robust collaboration around community change, around sustainable development, engaging faculty, and having maybe another conversation with just faculty that really gets at what are you doing and how can we help you do more and do better. So there is a science to it, there's a technology, and there are people that are doing this experientially. We'd like to sort of begin to learn from each other about how to engage.
So Ruven was going to also respond to the question. I think this gentleman here has also commented around that same question, and then there's a gentleman in the back.
And I guess just to get back to the practical for the faculty and the leaders from community colleges, on your campuses or in your districts, there are people who do the shot calling about what happens in the classroom. I think there was the whole process you all probably went through, probably finished by now, around the so-called student learning objectives, the SLOs. Well, the way to make this central is to make sure your SLO is defined by you, and that the faculty stand up for this, and then all of us join together and push back on the legislature and the governor, who are fast deciding that the community colleges should just be about the economic part that Brian is saying. If we do not stand up, not just the community colleges, but those of us who want the mission to be this, we don't stand up in California, we're soon not going to have these resources for people to do what we're saying. So I think, you know, we all know what the deal is, just we can't take the okey doke. The conversation has to be not just in our classes, but literally at the academic senate, and setting the standards for what we're actually learning and what our learning is all about, I think, as well. That is where I think that the academic senate, I think, are the you know, the shot callers on what's learned in the classroom, right? What's legitimate.
Okay, so gentleman here also on the same question.
Yes, I guess I just, to reframe what I was throwing out there originally, was just this idea that I'm feeling, and I'm sorry, it's not that, you know, we're not all well-intentioned in here, but there's undercurrent of all of this is this kind of arrogance that our students aren't engaged because they are not engaged in the way that we see engagement. They are not involved in democratic behaviors because they are not involved in the way that we see democratic behavior and how it is performed. And at what point do we, rather than saying, okay, we have everything figured out, and now let me come to you, and we've figured out how to get you to like drink this Kool-Aid, which we think is really good tasting and is nurturing Kool-Aid. How do we ask you, hey, can we have a little bit of that Kool-Aid that you're making so that we can use this to build shared solutions, not even solutions, but shared inspiration, because solutions are iterative, you know? Yes. And so I guess the other question kind of to follow up on that, and I guess but Brian's gone, I was gonna ask him, is we have this other barrier for our students, and that is called the Carnegie Hour. You know, and so when students are going to these programs, like you were defining, like at Michigan, and they do all this great work, yet they go to the town halls, they make these presentations, but then they have to go back and take 56 more hours of communications class to get credit for the work that they were doing in this other project. And so I think that's just another area that we need to work on together. And I applaud that you mentioned the Academic Senate, and I have to admit that I'm Academic Senate president here on campus. So, but that is our charge, and that is something that we definitely have to take on a little bit more proactively.
And I heard you say pedagogy, though. I heard you say pedagogy, that the answer to bring out the assets and the talents of young people is in how we teach and the respect we give young people. Well, that's what I mean. Are you teaching by talking or teaching by listening and encouraging dialogue and critical thinking and active learning? That's what I'm saying. So that is also being contended with at the Academic Senate. That's all I'm saying. If we want that educational pedagogy, we can have it, but we have to fight for it and unleash young people's talent. I'm with you.
So there's a gentleman in the back has been waiting for a while. If I could, I'll take the moderator's privilege of just jumping in on this real quickly. In terms of what the gentleman just said and what Al mentioned, you know, my organization, Poder, has a youth program, and we do youth leadership development, youth organizing, have done it for many, many years. We work with high school and college-age students, some of which are in City College. You know, basically, you know, as we increasingly talk about it, sort of putting into action the grassroots solutions that cool the planet, that fundamentally address, you know, the ecological, economic crises that our societies face by organizing for parks and open space, for affordable housing, for truly equitable transit-oriented development, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All of this outside of a school or academic setting, and it's a challenge for them to connect that at times with their sort of schooling. So I think that there's something about true partnerships also with community-based organizations. And it needs to be a partnership that's kind of like a long-term sustained, so that we are building something together, building that engagement and in civil society that we all want, and the kind of democracy and democratic agents that we want all of us to be a part of. But once again, it needs to be genuine. I mean, I won't mention but two schools, two higher education institutions in San Francisco over the last month contacted us because they wanted to partner because there was a grant opportunity. No relationship whatsoever beforehand. Never met these people, but there's a grant opportunity. They want a community partner. They've heard a lot of good stuff about that, so they're on the phone. And that's not how you create partnerships. So I think that there's something about how we're being proactive and strategic in, obviously in terms of instilling that social justice vision within a community college setting, but also engaging in partnerships with groups in the community that are putting that into practice. So in a very genuine way. So just my 2 cents here, and gentlemen in the back that have been waiting patiently.
Yeah, I had 2 cents. Now it's up to a nickel. I'm really encouraged by Cleavon's questions. A lot of us think that way. I work at Contra Costa College and at Richmond Build, and I'm incredibly encouraged by the democracy commitment. We have a program that is the demographic that is always at risk of violence, at risk of no electricity. And what we do is have a civics and a healthcare element in our pre-apprentice training, where I reserve a conference room at the Capitol in Sacramento and take 1 or 2 vans of students up there and bring legislators in so the students can advocate for themselves. And the empowerment that comes from that, the last time a kid slid into the front of the van with me and said, "I've never talked to anybody with that much power. 2 years ago, I was robbing people on the street." And I said, "Like this?" And he said, "Like this." So, I mean, that's just a suggestion to the democracy commitment. Connect these young people with their legislators. Get them in there, because the best advocates are the people that succeed in the program. And in California, we're at risk every minute of losing money. The community colleges have just become an ATM for the state. Literally, they've raised the fees $10 a unit whenever they want. And I can get you a fee waiver, but I can't pay for your books. So if those young people can advocate for themselves, then when they go to make a budget cut, they remember Jamal and the story he told. So there's power in our young people. We've got to let them use it.
Absolutely. We have, do you mind if I? Go. We have an annual conference. We have a joint annual conference with a project that has been going strong for about 10 years called the American Democracy Project, and it has to do, it encompasses state colleges and universities, generally not R1s, well, not generally, not R1s, and it's really interesting to see the dynamic and a distinct difference between community college students and the traditional 18 to 22-year-old four-year university students at these conferences, because the community college students have far more real-life experience, and they have far more stories to tell. And the four-year traditional students, they kind of are a bit more on the 30,000-foot level. So they want to talk about theory and philosophy, and the community college students want to know how to get things done. They want to know what they can do to talk to people, to advocate for themselves, and that's why they're so excited to come to our conferences, because when they will actually start organizing for themselves. Brian brought about 10 students from DeAnza, and it was phenomenal to see the difference between those students who have gone through a lot of the leadership training that is available at DeAnza, and then the students who just kind of came from the four-year universities who were just like, okay, we're here because it means we're not in class. So, it's really encouraging, and it makes my job so much more interesting every day because I was a community college student at Santa Monica College, and I benefited from the very small fee per credit. So it's really disheartening to find out that California, well, not to find out, but to know that California is doing so poorly at this point.
So I'll take one last question or comment from Linda.
Yes, sir. I just wanted to make, some comments based on the comments that were made, that was made by the panels and some of the folks in the community. I think we have to think about facts. Energy efficiency actually is a $1 trillion more industry. I think when the gentleman before emphasized on the need and emphasis on energy efficiency, which we have not even done anything to address, I think it was alluding to the overall energy problem that we have in the country. If the goal is to have city college to be, community colleges to be catalysts for change, I think we need to look at the training of the next generation of workers on energy efficiency. That's the only way that we're going to do that, and I think that it is extremely very important. Let me talk about some other issues, concerns that I have. The tendency sometimes in the new emerging movement is that everybody's coming to the table and everybody had their own agenda, great agendas, I might ask. But the implementation of this agenda is where we run into a problem because we lump in everything and everything is not prioritized. Why don't we just simplify this process? Community colleges partnership. Let's identify one of the three things that community college can do best. In the energy, efficiency training, the green economy, or how you want to frame that. Build that into equity. That's all we're talking about. We're still going to have the old players from the from the old model, economic model. Still going to have them at the table to be partners. It's not just like we're living in a world that we're just ourselves. There is something called global economy. I'm also concerned about before the minority students get to community colleges. In San Francisco, I always get back to the Unified School District, to the K-12 type of education, where in San Francisco, we have the distinction of having the highest score and the lowest for the entire state of California. And guess who are in the lower tier? It's not that they don't have the ability to do that, but in our educational system, we have the minorities, the African Americans, and the Latinos. They are not going to get into the city college, community colleges that we are now talking about. So the emphasis, and I'm talking to the leaders, the emphasis is to concentrate on that community colleges. I am going to tell you that in 10 years or whatever, we're not going to get there because we will have lost almost 60% of the population in California, with the statistics are right now are telling us are not going to get there because they are failing in the schools. So that's just something I wanted us to bear in mind. And lastly, while we are talking about empowering community colleges, San Francisco right now, because of the challenges for community colleges in San Francisco, probably in the entire California, we're talking about funding. We have Prop 30. If we do not try to find, that's another session of how we're going to capitalize and try to bring the funds that are necessary to the community colleges, I think all we've done all day is just talk and talk and talk because those challenges are real and we're dealing with them right now. I believe that community colleges can be the catalyst. However, if they are funding, staff are being laid off, the missions are being changed right now, and those are the realities, and I think we need to put that as a priority for all of us so that we can get to where all of you wanted to go, and that's the reality.
Thank you, Linda. Yeah, thanks for obviously raising those challenges. I think our great panel addressed some examples of how they're being addressed, and I actually want to thank the panelists for their time. Round of applause. And want to turn it over to Lee.
You guys were absolutely fabulous. You know, next time around, we're going to have this conversation at the beginning of the day because it is a very rich and important conversation to have. This is what you saw today is really the kinds of partnerships that Emerald Cities wants to bring to this region, is bringing to this region. You've heard from our partners, from our local councils, our business partners, the Democracy Commitment, the U.S. Green Building Council, the Democracy Commitment, our investors. It's here. You need to help organize us to have the greatest impact and scale for the vision that we want to collectively create. Thank you all for this wonderful day. I have to have you all say thank you to the people that made it happen. Tara, Avni Park.